This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Health authorities in Gaza say Israeli airstrikes have killed at least 27 people. The EU announced $255 million humanitarian budget for Sahel countries. And South Sudan's President Salva Kiir reconstitutes parliament, a crucial step to the peace process. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the country and the continent, we thank you for joining us. And tonight I'm alongside Uche, who has our headlines. Uche.
Thank you, Richard. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Kenya suspends all flights with Somalia, citing operational sensitive information. And a shadowy criminal network that attacked the largest U.S. pipeline says they only wanted to make money. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, it is back to you, Richard.
Thank you so much, Uche. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. So good to have you with us. We start in the Middle East, where the death toll has been growing as violence escalates between Israel and Gaza. Israeli airstrikes have killed at least 27 people in Gaza. Health authorities say 9 children are among the dead. Palestinian militants have fired more than 300 rockets since Monday, overwhelming Israeli missile defenses and killing 2 Israelis. The exchange of fire follows days of unrest in Jerusalem, with clashes between Palestinians and Israeli police injuring more than 700 people at Al-Aqsa Mosque, one of the Islam's holiest sites. The anger was sparked over the threatened eviction of Palestinians from their homes by Jewish settlers in East Jerusalem. The European Union has announced a humanitarian budget of 210 million euros, an equivalent of $255 million US to countries in the Sahel and Central Africa. According to the EU, the move is a reaffirmation of its solidarity with vulnerable people. The funding will be allocated to humanitarian projects in 8 countries, including Burkina Faso, Central African Republic, Mali, and Chad. The EU's Commissioner for Crisis Management says the worsening instability caused by armed conflict and the COVID-19 pandemic is having a devastating impact in the Sahel and countries in Central Africa. All right, let's bring in Tony Waterman in Brussels. Tony, thanks for joining us here on Africa Live. Can you give us more details about this humanitarian package?
Yeah, as you mentioned, Richard, this is a $255 million humanitarian budget that's been laid out for this year, which is actually slightly less money than they put towards this last year. And as you mentioned, this is going to be divvied up among 8 countries, with Nigeria being the largest recipient. It's set to receive about $45 million. And of course, all of these countries have their own unique humanitarian needs. But what the EU has done is sort of earmarked locations where they'd like to see this money funneled, including to address food shortages, malnutrition in children, also to help support people who are victims of conflict, or the communities that are supporting people who have fled their homes. Also, there's money set aside for education and climate change. But this Central Africa belt here is going to be the largest recipient of EU humanitarian aid this year. And Brussels saying that this money is meant to be offering emergency relief, but that if there is going to be any sort of long-term solution to these problems, these chronic challenges that these areas face, that it needs to take place through a democratic process and also through the will of the people. But of course, all of the challenges that the region has been facing compounded now by the COVID pandemic.
Well, thank you, Tony. Important information that you shared with us. Now, Tony, the humanitarian situation in the Sahel is compounded by, you guessed it, COVID-19. Any measure to mitigate the impact of the coronavirus pandemic?
Well, besides this humanitarian aid package, the EU also sends in other support. So it has donated about $2.5 billion to the COVAX facility. This is that worldwide program to bring vaccines to mostly low-income countries. So a lot of these vaccines are meant to be going to Africa. Just last month, it pledged $120 million to help with the vaccine campaign rollouts across African countries. One thing that it has not done, though, is to actually donate the vaccines themselves. It's really just putting money behind this issue, and it has received a fair amount of criticism for not donating the physical vaccine. You're not going to be able to inject money into people's arms and expect any sort of protection when it comes to the pandemic. It also hasn't gotten behind South Africa and India's initiative at the WTO to temporarily waive patent rights, intellectual property rights on COVID-19 patents. It says that this is not really going to solve the problem of these supply constraints that we're seeing in the global marketplace right now. And instead, it wants to invest in ramping up capacity, particularly in Europe, and then using that capacity at some point to then export some vaccines, some finished vaccines, to other parts of the world. So these are some of the challenges that Europe is facing right now when it comes to its broader, more holistic humanitarian aid effort.
All right, Tony Waterman, let's leave it there for now. Tony Waterman in Brussels, we appreciate your insights. Let's broaden this discussion. Joining us now via Zoom is Paul Melly, Consulting Fellow, Africa Program, Chatham House. He joins us from London. Paul, thanks for joining us on Africa Live. Paul, what do you make of this EU aid package, and what impact is it likely to have on the humanitarian crisis in the Sahel?
Well, I think it's very much needed because the problems are huge. And just to give you a couple of illustrations, in the Central African Republic, close to half the entire population have had to flee their homes. They're either internally displaced within the country or refugees over the border, particularly in Cameroon and Democratic Republic of Congo. And then in Burkina Faso, for example, during the course of last year, the number of people who had to flee their homes probably multiplied something like 7 or 8 times to close to 1 million people. More than 1,000 schools have been closed because of attacks by armed groups. So in that kind of security situation, obviously you have huge numbers of people who are forced away from their normal settings. And most of these people are living from agriculture in villages. So once they're not in those villages, they don't have a means of livelihood or support. They're not cultivating their fields. So that's why the need is so urgent. And obviously all of the EU aid will be very much useful in bringing urgent supplies, shelter, water, food, etc. But there is a much bigger picture, which is that obviously, particularly in the Sahel, which is vulnerable to climate change, there are huge long-term challenges, long-term development challenges. And the EU has a separate long-term development program to support the countries of the Sahel in tackling those sort of development issues, agriculture, construction of schools, roads, and all of the other sort of basic things. But this humanitarian aid is very much an urgent short-term you can say it's a sticking plaster, but it's a sticking plaster that's absolutely essential and much needed. Until at least the security situation can be stabilized better and people can return home.
All right, Paul, speaking of long-term challenges, this kind of assistance only brings emergency relief. What are some of the longer-lasting interventions that are needed for the region?
Well, the sort of things that are needed are measures to strengthening the resilience, particularly of the rural agricultural economy and livestock herding in the face of climate change, because the Sahel, of course, is this band of countries along the southern fringe of the Sahara, where they're very prone to drought. It only rains for probably 3 months, even in a good year. And so a lot of measures are needed to try and counter environmental degradation. There is, for example, a project called the Great Green Wall, which is to plant vegetation, trees, vegetable plots, bushes in a whole huge number of sites right across these countries to try and resist desertification. And then you also need programs to support, for example, getting girls into secondary education. There's been a lot of progress in enrolling children, particularly girls, into primary schools, but getting them to stay on into secondary school has a really huge development impact in increasing their skills and their capacity to make their own choices in life about when they will establish a family, whether they will continue to work in the village or look for work in towns that might be paid with wages. So that's a huge area. And then you have questions of water security, for example, well drilling, and you also need those big bucks infrastructure things, roads, for example. The EU committed to finance the building of a road to link Timbuktu in northern Mali on the edge of the Sahara Desert to the rest of the country, because the road that was existing before had to take a very, very long way around. And that made it hard to develop more economic activity and jobs in Timbuktu. If this new road is completed, that will make a big difference to the economic viability of the region. But always you have these security challenges at the moment, with armed groups very active, and despite the efforts of the national militaries and international forces, the situation remains very, very fragile. So this humanitarian aid that we're looking at today is needed in this urgent short-term situation to look after people and support populations and ensure, for example, that they get food. Now we're in what's called the lean season, la soudure, the period of the year when food supplies run most short, because the farming season runs from June through to September. So now we're 9 months away from the last harvest. Food stocks are running very low. You have people, even those people who haven't been forced to flee their villages, are often in a very precarious situation in terms of food and nutrition. So that's why this urgent humanitarian aid is needed, so that people are kept at least alive and at a basic level of survival and well-being until the security conditions permit an improved uplift in long-term development efforts.
All right. Paul Melly speaking to us from London. Thanks for sharing your perspective. Much appreciated. Let's turn our attention now to Nigeria, where gunmen have reportedly abducted dozens of worshipers from a mosque in the northwestern state of Katsina. Authorities say many of them have been rescued, but some are still unaccounted for. Insecurity has grown worse in Nigeria, with increased kidnappings in the north, despite government efforts to beef up security. Our correspondent Philly Haza reports from Abuja.
Police authorities say about 40 worshippers were kidnapped while observing Ramadan prayers in the town of Jibia, Katsina State. Spokesperson for the Katsina Police Command, Gambo Issa, says at least 30 people have been rescued so far, while around 10 people are still missing or held captive by the criminals. According to Issa, security operatives and some local vigilantes chased after the kidnappers after the incident at the weekend. Kidnapping for ransom by armed criminal gangs has become rife in Nigeria, with Katsina being one of the worst affected states. More than 300 students of the government science secondary school in Kankara, Katsina State, were abducted in December last year. They spent weeks in captivity before being released by their abductors. President Muhammadu Buhari has condemned the spate of kidnappings and criminality across the country and urged security operatives to step up its efforts in protecting lives and property. The Katsina Police Command says it will not relent until the remaining people are found and reunited with their families. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
A female United Nations peacekeeper has been killed in an attack that occurred in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. The UN mission in the DRC says the Malawian peacekeeper was killed on Monday by suspected rebels of the Allied Democratic Forces. CGTN's Chris Ochemringa has more from Kinshasa.
Local authorities say a group of armed men attacked a UN base in the village of Kilia in eastern DRC. A female peacekeeper from Malawi was shot dead in the attack. The UN peacekeeping mission in the DRC has identified her as Chichenji Kamanga. She has been described as a courageous, hardworking and disciplined soldier. Authorities in eastern DRC have blamed the attack on Monday on the Allied Democratic Forces rebel group. It's an Islamist rebel group with origins in neighboring Uganda. In 2018, 6 peacekeepers from Malawi and 1 from Tanzania were killed by rebels in the eastern territory of Beni while conducting operations against the Allied Democratic Forces. The UN Secretary General has condemned the killing of the Malawian peacekeeper and called on the armed groups to end hostilities. The latest killing comes amid an ongoing state of siege imposed by the DRC president in Ituri and North Kivu province in a bid to end the killings of civilians. Chris Sochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Residents of South Sudan's capital, Juba, have welcomed President Salva Kiir's move to reconstitute parliament. The formation of a parliament comprising 550 members on Monday is in accordance with the country's 2018 peace agreement. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
After more than a year since the formation of a unity government began, South Sudan now has a new parliament comprising 550 members. The formation of the National Assembly is being welcomed by many in the capital, Juba.
It gives us hope, and I hope this is change that will come. And because once the parliament begins to work, we can really realize changes. So I really give hopes for this, and I give thanks for the move.
We are very happy indeed as South Sudanese, but the bigger issue is the implementation of the peace agreement that is waiting. All South Sudanese are yearning for that. Then the time frame of the election also.
The parliament is expanded from 400 to 550 members, comprising representatives from 5 peace parties that signed the 2018 peace agreement. However, the formation of the unity government is still far from over. The state legislative assemblies still have to be put in place. Commissions that are expected to help in the implementation of the agreement are also yet to be set up. The National Assembly is considered crucial to the peace deal's success.
As a lawyer or as a South Sudanese, I hope in the nearest future or in the as quick as possible, Parliament needs to be sworn in, and then from there it can embark on its work.
The ministries created by the peace deal rely on the new parliament for the passing of their policies as legislation.
What is next is to inject into the political parties' leaders the political will to actually give the parliament the rightful duties and roles to play in the enacting laws and establishment of the institutions, especially the hybrid court of South Sudan.
The 2018 peace agreement also dictates that the parties to the peace deal form an upper house of parliament known as Council of States, comprising 100 members. That is yet to be put together. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Time now for a short break. Here's what's ahead on Africa Live. Africa's dilemma as COVID-19 ravages India.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. The global COVID-19 vaccination campaign has passed its biggest milestone yet, with more than 1 billion doses administered. Bloomberg reports more than 1.3 billion shots have been handed out in 175 countries at a rate of roughly 20 million injections per day. And that's enough to fully vaccinate 8.6% of the world's population, but distribution remains unequal. High-income countries are getting vaccinated 25 times faster than low-income countries. Experts say at the current speed, it will still take years to achieve a significant level of global immunity. Yet, they are optimistic as additional vaccines enter the market and the rate steadily increases. Egyptian Health Minister Hala Zaid has announced that Egypt's production of the Chinese Sinovac COVID-19 vaccine will begin in June. Egypt and China have signed agreements to produce the vaccine domestically in Cairo and transfer the technology needed for production. Here's Adel El-Mahroui with more.
Egyptian Health Minister Hala Zaid visited the government's vaccination manufacturing arm Vaxera to follow up on the preparations for producing the Sinovac COVID-19 vaccine. An initial plan to produce 40 million doses annually is in place. According to Zaid, the Chinese pharmaceutical will be sending the raw material needed for production by May 18.
We held an important meeting with the Vaxera management and the Egyptian Drug Authority to discuss the big step Egypt is about to take in manufacturing the COVID-19 vaccine with the Chinese company Sinovac. I am very thankful to the Chinese government and the Chinese ambassador for their very hard work to reach these agreements. There is huge demand for vaccines. The world is racing to import the vaccines. China supported Egypt to manufacture them.
China and Egypt signed two agreements, one to manufacture the jab domestically, the other is to transfer the entire technology needed so Cairo can handle the production process domestically.
This vaccine production cooperation will be for Egypt's vaccine needs, and vaccines can also be exported to Africa. Egypt aims to be a hub for manufacturing vaccines and support our brothers in Africa. We collaborate with all nations that face a surge in infections. We will help to cover the needs of Africans so this crisis of mankind can pass with the fewest losses possible.
2 million doses should be ready by the end of June. The nation's drug authority will then need 3 additional weeks for testing to ensure that the vaccine meets the required standards. The COVID-19 vaccine will be registered internationally under the name Sinovac Vaxera, merging the two companies' names together. It will also be a first-of-its-kind production cooperation between China and Africa during the COVID-19 pandemic. Adel El-Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
With less than 2% of the world's COVID-19 vaccines administered in Africa, there are growing calls for the continent to be allowed to produce its own vaccines to meet demand. But does it have the capacity to manufacture its own vaccines? Here's CGTN's Robert Nagila with more.
As debate rages on intellectual property waivers for COVID-19 vaccines, developing countries, especially in Africa, are pushing to be allowed to manufacture the vaccines. But some developed countries and pharmaceutical companies dismiss the plan, arguing few countries on the continent have the capacity to produce the vaccines. Can Africa produce its vaccines with a patent waiver? Yes, says South Africa.
It is for this reason that South Africa and India proposed the TRIPS waiver at the World Trade Organization to enable manufacturing of COVID-19 vaccines in developing countries.
According to the World Health Organization, there are fewer than 10 manufacturers in Africa with vaccine production capabilities in 5 countries: Egypt, Morocco, Senegal, South Africa and Tunisia. But waiving intellectual property rights on vaccines is not enough.
It's also important to remember that intellectual property waivers will need to be accompanied by transfer of technology and know-how for this difficult to make vaccines.
And that is just the beginning.
It's all about enable, enable, enable.
Health experts say for Africa to produce its own vaccines, a coordinated effort of all factors is required with a commitment from its partners.
And then a clear agreement that not only are the patents waived, but also the supply of the reagents for making the vaccines, and then enable the setting up of plants.
But the continent is not waiting. Last month, the African Union launched the Partnership for African Vaccine Manufacturing. It seeks to support 5 regional production sites over the next decade mobilize financial partnerships, and facilitate technology transfer. It also plans to develop African universities into vaccine research and development hubs. Bobat Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Meanwhile, vaccine hesitancy remains a key challenge in overcoming COVID-19. Kenya's health ministry plans to redistribute at least 200,000 doses of unused COVID-19 vaccines. Health Minister Kagwa said the vaccines would be taken to cities or countries where uptake is higher to prevent wastage. CGTN's Wilkerson Yabwa has more on that story.
Kenya's Health Minister Mutahi Kagwe announced that the government has had challenges with COVID-19 vaccine distribution in areas where uptake is low. The country has so far received a total of 1.2 million vaccine doses and distributed just under 1.1 million doses across the country. But by 10th May, Kenya had vaccinated just over 917,000 people.
People like me have never received the vaccine. I've searched for the vaccine point, so if there are counties where the vaccines are lying idle, they can bring them to other counties and we use them.
Let them save the vaccines and give those who got the first dose a second one.
The government now plans to take back about 200,000 doses from low uptake counties and redistribute them to areas where demand is high. Some regions are believed to be holding on to the vaccines in preparation to administer second doses later in the year. However, most of the vaccines which arrived in the country in January are set to expire in June. Kenya is among 42 African countries which signed up to the COVAX initiative, which aims to ensure equitable global access to COVID-19 vaccines. The country was set to receive 3.6 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine between February and May. However, the ongoing COVID-19 crisis in India has hampered the production and export of vaccines from the Serum Institute of India. This now leaves Kenya scampering to find vaccines for its population. Wilkerson Yabwa, CGTN.
South Africa may have to buckle down and be more vigilant as variants from other parts of the world arrive on its shores. The variant first detected in the UK and the variant that is behind a spike in the infections in India have both been detected recently. South Africa's COVID-19 cases are edging towards 1.6 million with an average of 1,800 new cases each day. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
South Africa's infection rate is steadily picking up as concerns grow over two new variants. The dominant B.1.1.7 variant in the UK and the B.6.1.7.2, which sent India's infection rate skyrocketing, have been detected here. The number of cases are small, but are being carefully managed.
This was detected in people that had recently arrived from India. So there was a link to India. Now, we also detected some new cases of the B.1.1.7 variant, which is the variant that was first detected in the south of England, in Kent.
The World Health Organization labeled the strain dominant in India as a variant of concern. Scientists have, however, called for calm. The N501Y.V2 strain, which drove South Africa's second wave, is still behind most infections locally.
With our genomic sequencing around the country, we still see that the 501Y.V2 is completely dominant in most parts of the country. It's still responsible for 99% of the infections, according to the sequencing.
Experts are optimistic that the second wave may have boosted immunity against imported variants.
In vitro studies, so studies in the lab, have shown that immunity induced by the variant that is very common in South Africa does seem to protect against the variant that's very common in the UK. So it's likely that this immunity that we have from 501Y.V2 is going to protect us, at least to some extent, against other variants if they come into the country.
Communities are, however, being urged to stay on their guard with a resurgence of new infections in some parts of the country.
If we apply non-pharmaceutical interventions like social distancing, wearing masks, hand washing, using sanitizer, good ventilation, it's very clear that we can control the epidemic. because that's what's happened in South Africa with our second wave.
Scientists predict South Africa's third wave may be less severe than the last one. There has, however, been calls for tighter restriction as the country prepares to upscale its vaccine program. Julie Shire, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Authorities in South Africa's Western Cape province are working to register citizens ahead of its vaccination rollout program for people over 60. The province currently has the highest number of COVID-related deaths in the country. Although the number of new cases of COVID-19 are said to have stabilized, the race is on to register older adults who are among the most vulnerable. Renee Delcarme reports.
For most people living in South Africa's townships, the COVID-19 crisis has meant increased poverty and hunger. For others, like 64-year-old Margaret Tonzi, it has brought a heightened sense of sadness and fear.
I was feeling sad the way the people that they were getting sick, and I did see with my own eyes, and the way the people that they were dying with this coronavirus.
The grandmother of 8 was among a group of older adults registering for the COVID-19 jab. Using cell phone technology, the over 60s were signed up by the Western Cape Health Minister, nurses and community health workers.
I'm coming now to register for this injection so that I must not catch this coronavirus, because I am really frightened for it.
For us, our headache is the vulnerable, the 60-plus-year-olds that needs to be vaccinated, 752,000. We need to make sure that the people who normally clog our health system, which is the older persons, who also normally have got other chronic conditions, have to be vaccinated. The vaccination starts from 17 May, and then for the 60-plus-year-olds, at least by the end of June, we're supposed to have vaccinated all of them.
The minister said her province aimed to vaccinate over 250,000 people over the age of 60 in the next month and a half, but less than a quarter of them had registered so far.
It was only 24% of the elderly persons who have registered. It is worrisome, so that's why now we have to make sure we go to the people and find those older persons, especially those who might not have access to register.
Most of the elderly people here at the Masi Manyane Center say they suffer from comorbidities such as diabetes, asthma and high blood pressure, and say they've been extremely fearful of contracting COVID-19, but feel a bit more hopeful now that their names have finally been entered into South Africa's electronic vaccination data system.
You are successfully registered. Thank you so much.
Health officials are calling on the people of the Western Cape to unite and vaccinate, saying no one in the province is safe until most of them, young and old, are vaccinated. Renee Delcarme, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
The news continues on Africa Live. Time now for our business segment with Uche.
Thank you, Richard. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Kenya suspends all flights with Somalia, citing operational sensitive information. And a shadowy criminal network that attacked the largest U.S. pipeline says they only wanted to make money.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, Kenya has suspended all flights to Somalia, citing a security directive. The suspension came into effect on Tuesday and will last for 3 months until August the 9th. Now, according to Kenya's Civil Aviation Authority, only medical evacuations and United Nations flights on humanitarian missions will be allowed between the two nations. Now, this comes barely 5 days after Somalia said it had restored diplomatic ties with Kenya. Flights from Somalia passing through Kenyan airspace to another destination will, however, be exempted. Meanwhile, a group of cyber criminals allegedly responsible for the ransomware attack on a U.S. pipeline only wanted to make money. A statement issued in the name of the group called DarkSide indicates that the goal was not to create problems for society. The U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigations has attributed the cyber attack to the group believed to be based in Russia or Eastern Europe. Now, President Joe Biden says that there was no evidence to show that Russia's government was involved. The group shot the largest fuel pipeline in the United States, the Colonial Pipeline. It is now in its 4th day of shutdown, but hopes to substantially restore services by the end of the week.
These are clearly for-profit hackers. They have a for-profit business model. They're very serious about their business. They run it like a business. They even have an ethics page for their business where they talk about the different institutions that they won't attack. And they say government, medical, funeral-related, educational-related. Then they're only going to go after companies, they say, that make a profit. They analyze their balance sheets and they make a determination as to how much the organization can afford to pay. And then they go to work. They find a way to get their ransomware under their systems, their malware under the systems, and then they take over systems, encrypt the information, demand payment.
And moving on now, a gaming giant is doing battle with a tech titan in court. Game maker Epic Games is suing Apple's App Store for what it claims is a walled garden monopoly. And week 2 of the trial is now underway this week. Here's Mark New with the details.
Under the jurisdiction of the U.S. District Court of Northern California, the world's most valuable company, Apple, is being sued by the maker of one of the world's most popular games, Fortnite. In August, Fortnite set up its own mobile payment system for players to purchase the game's virtual currency known as V-Bucks. That not only gave players a discount, but also circumvented the iOS App Store's 30% cut. Apple kicked Fortnite out of its store.
It's sort of like you buy a car and you pay 30% to maybe the car dealer. And then every time you gas up the car, you pay another 30%. So like every single in-app purchase that is done forever goes to the platform owner, and that's Epic's analogy for what's happening when Apple takes its share.
Epic's lawyers are arguing that Apple has created a walled garden with operating margins at more than 75%. But Apple says it doesn't allow sideloading or the downloading of apps from outside sources because it wants its devices to be more reliable and secure.
Google and Microsoft do allow sideloading, so their stores aren't absolute, while Apple's store is absolute, which provides an advantage of enhanced curation and less chance of being hacked. On the other hand, it means you have to adhere to all Apple's rules.
But Apple has pointed out there are many other competing platforms to play Fortnite on, such as Android and Xbox. It also says the iOS App Store accounts for just 7% of Fortnite's revenues compared to Sony PlayStation's 47%.
Apple is not the dominant player in this space anymore, though in the past, enforcement bodies have said, well, but if you create an environment or you control the environment, you have a monopoly in that environment, and thus the rules surrounding antitrust do apply to you.
Epic also argues that Apple's rules are inconsistent. Under questioning, an Apple executive revealed that users of the popular app Roblox can indeed trade in-game currency bought outside of the iOS App Store.
When you have monopoly power, Epic is successfully arguing that you should wield it wisely and not have arbitrary rules, like, say, setting up a difference between Roblox and Epic. in terms of who's allowed to do certain things and who cannot. I think Epic also has a good case that there would be benefit for consumers if Apple were forced to have a more rational royalty policy.
The trial continues for the next 2 weeks with top executives from Apple, including CEO Tim Cook, expected to take the stand. Mark New, CGTN, San Francisco.
And heading back to the continent now, mushroom farming in Tanzania is seeing a rise in popularity. While they were once picked in the wild, mushrooms are now being commercially grown, providing producers with a solid source of income. Well, CGTN's Isaac Lucando went to meet some of those venturing into fungi farming.
These rows of compost-laden plastic bags are actually a mushroom farm. Through them, Paulina Nta, a 75-year-old mother of 10, has found a new source of income. 2 years ago, she was a stay-at-home great-grandmother. Now she harvests 3 to 4 kilograms of mushrooms a day.
Here, mushrooms are bought for $3.50 from farmers like us. Those who buy from us sell at $4.50, making a profit too. Some go as far as selling a kilo of mushrooms for $6, so the money I get is enough for me.
Paulina's farming instructor says with the right knowledge and skills, a few square meters can yield up to 200 kilograms of mushrooms a day. He believes large investments are the key to boosting the country's output.
Smaller farmers sometimes lack the morale to produce more, asking themselves, if we produce more, then what? But if they're giant producers who penetrate and sell the product outside the country, others will be encouraged. More will come forward to invest, produce and sell.
According to the Tanzania Mushroom Growers Association, there are more than 10,000 mushroom farmers in the country. They produce nearly 2,000 tons of oyster mushrooms every year. Mushrooms can be farmed on small plots of land, making them an accessible crop for independent farmers. Full of nutrients, they are also environmentally friendly, which helps protect growers from weather variations. Despite their benefits, mushrooms are not widely eaten in Tanzania, particularly in urban areas.
Most people think that mushrooms are eaten by tourists in big hotels, but it's not true. Mushrooms can be eaten at home the same way you eat vegetables or fish. I eat mushroom soup the most.
Paulina sells her mushrooms to neighbors and other interested buyers. She believes a larger market will not only bring her more income, but will also attract more farmers into the business. Isaac Lucando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but coming up later on Global Business Africa, Ethio Telecom launches the country's first ever mobile money service. We'll have the details all coming up top of the hour. For now, back to Richard.
Thank you so much, Uche. We're not done just yet. A lot more coming your way on Africa Live. Here's a peek at what's ahead. Plant lovers flock to Cairo's Spring Flower Festival amid COVID-19 health restrictions.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for sticking with us. After canceling it last year because of the COVID-19 pandemic, Egypt decided to hold its Spring Flowers exhibition this year. The annual event is the biggest display of decorative plants and flowers in the country. With health restrictions in place this year, thousands joined the festival, which aims to encourage citizens to grow more plants. Here's Adel El Mahroui with more on that story.
On a 28-acre park in the heart of the Egyptian capital, Cairo once again welcomes plant lovers from across the country. Last year, the event coincided with Egypt's first COVID-19 lockdown, so it got cancelled. This year, health measures have been implemented so as not to deprive visitors from this unique opportunity to become acquainted with the latest trends in flowers and decorative plants.
This is my first time attending this event. My family and I thought it would be a good idea to come after these long months of the lockdown. The flowers look lovely and we are really enjoying this. We need this kind of break from the tension that we're living in because of the pandemic.
This year, the government's Center for Agricultural Research participated to enrich the experience of young growers in a step that aims to expand what the government says is a promising field in the agricultural sector.
Flowers and decorative plants are booming businesses. There's demand for shade, outdoor or home garden plants. This rising industry gets exported. This fair aims to support this industry. It's also an opportunity for people to have a change of scenery in this magnificent park.
More than 238 exhibitors displayed their products this year. This colorful festival is one of the biggest exposures they get to the public all year. Tens of thousands usually attend the event, which is marking its 88th edition.
I have been participating in this festival for 14 years because all producers come here. It turned into a competition. Some people try to cultivate new plants or designs. Others don't. I'm keen to display the best I have, not only to sell to people, but to show others what I am capable of. This kind of competition develops the industry a lot.
We try to bring the biggest possible collection to enrich this artistry display of nature. At the same time, we try to introduce a wide range of prices so plants can be affordable to all kinds of visitors. I see people who love plants and adore their beauty, but their financial capabilities are limited.
Prices for a plant starts as low as 30 US cents. They can go up to thousands of dollars depending on the age, quality and rarity of the plant. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
All right, hey there sports fans, don't go away because we've got your sports news coming up after the break. Here's what's ahead. In sports, Tanzania's Simba embracing being this year's dark horse in the CAF Champions League.